I'd like to deeply thank the organizers for the opportunity of presenting our research experience on the glycocalyx, moving from the bench to the venous bedside, and more, as you will see at the end of this presentation. There is a reason why you see a turtle over here navigating over a surface of corals. So let me explain you why right after giving my conflicts of interest that are non-related to this specific topic. I can explain you why the turtle by this nice Britannica video that is reminding us that indeed life started at the bottom of the oceans. If we look at the coral's surface, we can find the answer. The coral surface has many ciliar structures that are sensitive to the different kind of flows acting on it inside of the oceans. Now, these different flow stimuli are translated into biochemical messages by the coral, allowing the coral to grow in a proper way or to die if there is a pathological flow, pathological currency. The amazing thing is that this image you are looking at, taken from a coral, are extremely similar to the ones you will see taken by our research group by the electron microscopy on the endothelium lining, and not just of the veins, as you will see. So bear in mind this halo structure on the surface of the coral, remembering that this is the way the corals are translating the biochemical forces from the different stimuli of the hemodynamic forces, if it was a vein or an artery, but in this case of the oceans, so the hydrodynamic forces, I would say. It is part of the evolution, of the Darwinian evolution, because indeed we can find in the literature that these ciliar structures are present in the mammalians, on the way to the humans, in all the different organs, in physiology and also in pathology. But let's try to make it as simple as possible, simply saying that these ciliar structures are basically bending, allowing inflow and outflow of different ions. And if we have a physiological flow, this bending will be gentle and physiological, allowing a physiological in and outflow of ions that will be translated into a physiological phenotype expression of the endothelium lining. But if there is turbulence, if there is pathology in the hemodynamic forces, this bending will be indeed pathological, leading to a pathological inflow and outflow of ions, with consequent pathological signaling for the biochemical messengers. This is not indeed a surprise to find thrombosis in specific turbulent area of the veins and atherosclerosis in the bifurcation region of the arterial system. And indeed, this is in line with what we published before regarding the hemodynamic forces being restored into the venous system after varicose veins procedures, leading to a normalization of different biomarkers of inflammation, including also platelet-derived growth factor that is indeed associated potentially with the thrombotic risk of chronic venous disease. The glycocalyx is this kind of ciliar structure in a sort of way on the endothelium lining. And to remember what it does, I usually think about the PC, the computer, because it gives permeability, it gives protection to the endothelium lining, it is also giving contractility properties and coagulation balance. So PC, permeability, protection, contractility, and coagulation. It is a very intricate network of glycosaminoglycans, protoglycans that has been perfectly described by Zheng as a critical signaling platform because it is giving the signal from the physical forces into the biochemical messages. But to make it simple, once again, let's say it is just an electronically charged layer on the endothelium lining that is governing this mechanical transduction, as it is usually called. We could also think about that as a forest that is protecting the endothelium lining. And we know, of course, deforestation is not good for plant health, as we understand deforestation of the glycocalyx is not good for the vascular protection. And indeed, if we lose the thickness of the glycocalyx, we have more atherosclerosis. And if we lose the glycocalyx volume, we are going to have more hyperglycemia damage on the arterial side. Both in the arterial and venous side, the glycocalyx has been recently defined as an innovative treatment target that is indeed attracting our attention as researchers, particularly if we consider that the disease could start very early when we are dealing with chronic venous disease. Papers like these ones that are showing, for example, the functional capillary density is already decreased at C0s, so when the disease has not started yet macroscopically. In this context, whatever drug can restore the glycocalyx can be of interest, and in this sense, surodexide indeed demonstrated antithrombotic, anti-inflammatory, and endothelial protective actions that have been indeed confirmed also the challenging time of COVID, letting us understand how COVID is indeed an endothelial pathogen. And indeed, we see how acting on the glycocalyx through drugs like surodexide, we can have an improvement in all cause of mortality, with also no serious concerns in terms of bleeding risk, as per this nice revision of Big Daddy. But I'd like to focus even more on this paper of Chang, that is reminding us how varicose veins is not just an aesthetic concern. We have a DVT risk that is increased by 5 times at least. And very interestingly, the inflammation of the endothelium is associated also with an increased risk of peripheral arterial disease. This is, I think, very important in a meeting of surgeons, because if we look at the data from surveys like this one from the Irish colleagues, we see how much we have to discuss still about the peri-procedural management of our patients. You see over here, 73.3% of our colleagues in Ireland are giving always a thromboprophylaxis during varicose veins procedures, that in 71.4% of cases, just one single shot of heparin independently by the risk assessment of every single patient. And this also in a COVID time in which might have a higher risk of developing post-procedural thrombosis. That is, by the way, already higher than what we usually think if we think that in day surgery procedures, we have a risk that is up to 10 times higher, not just for a few days, but for weeks, as per this publication. In this sense, we really look forward for presenting the results of our research on the Step Ahead study that is indeed looking at surodexide as a potential drug for the thromboprophylaxis in varicose veins patients. And this is a topic that we have been touching since 2019, and when we published this document on similarities and controversies in the different guidelines around the world. So I encourage you to download it for free and have a look at the different perspectives around the world on this very hot topic. Another hot topic we touched in that document is the one of the overlapping between veins and arteries in terms of chronic venous disease and peripheral arterial disease. There is a very interesting publication recently published that is showing us how there were signs of chronic venous insufficiency in 21% of peripheral arterial disease patients, but only 18% of them were actually treated. So there is a lot of overlapping between chronic venous disease and peripheral arterial disease, but there is a lot of undermanagement of the chronic venous disease component. And this is very interesting when we consider papers like this one, showcasing that when we reduce the inflammation of the endothelium on the venous side by a proper treatment of chronic venous disease, we also reduce the risk of peripheral arterial disease. So I think this is the perfect meeting to discuss about this topic, as we discussed during previous educational initiatives like the one of the GREAT project, for which you can, for free, have a look at the material we produce in terms of education on this aspect. The same thing for the project we dedicated to the pelvic venous thrombosis risk. Because if we think about that, we have indeed a reflux also in the pelvic venous system that is leading into an inflammation that in the lower limb is leading to an increased risk of thrombosis, as we said before, but that has not been really investigated in the pelvic venous district, for which I find this paper of Amin particularly interesting. Look at the data they presented. 1,383 screened women going to the gynecologist for whatever reason, having a 3% incidental periuterine venous plexus thrombosis. I will say this again because this is extremely interesting in my opinion. Of all the women going to the gynecologist for whatever reason, 3% of them are presenting an incidental periuterine venous plexus thrombosis, suggesting that there is a venous inflammation also the pelvic district that is still underdiagnosed and undermanaged, for which we, with the WIN Foundation, we developed these pelvic questionnaires that are available in different languages for everybody, so feel free to have a look at the website in case. But when you are looking at the veins, remember to look also at the lymphatics. It's like a little bit Antonio and Cleopatra. We know that they really go together. And indeed, it was already reported by giants like Parsh and BVD that veins and lymphatics are a family affair. So starting from this concept of common progenitors and having veins and lymphatic similarities, we started thinking that if there is a glycocalyx in the veins and in the arteries in terms of endothelium, what about the lymphatics? We asked around the world to all our friends, and in reality, nobody has an answer. So we started a new research on this topic, harvesting from humans, ex vivo, veins and lymphatics from healthy subjects. It was very difficult, of course, to obtain valuable samples, particularly for the lymphatic component, to have a look at the electron microscopy. I'd like to deeply congratulate Erica Rimondi from our University of Ferrara Research Lab for having found a way to fix, in particular, the lymphatic sample by glutaraldate and Alshan blue. And in this way, starting together a multi-center investigation, really from the bench to, in this case, not the venous, but the lymphatic bedside, a sort of 20,000 leagues under the sea journey that led us to present to you what, to my knowledge, is the very first in a human picture of lymphatic glycocalyx at the electron microscopy. Now, the interesting thing is that you can compare it with the vein of the same subject at 100,000 magnification. Notice the same structures like a halo that we saw on the coral surface at the beginning of the video. But let's dive then once again inside the oceans, because you could say, well, we are just looking at a picture, Sergio. What are we really looking at? And to answer that question, we did indeed immunohistochemistry, focusing first on podoplanin to make sure that we were identifying the lymphatic that you can see over here near the vein, and then identifying a glypican that is indeed one of the components of the glycocalyx. And then finding other components like brevican, mucina, and agrin, some of them making total sense, like brevican that is part of the synapses tissue, so interconnection system, and at the same time mucin 2 that is part of the extracellular matrix, so again filtration processes could be involved. Agrin, I wish we will be able to tell you why it's there very soon, because up to now we are still investigating. But it is a very interesting investigation indeed, because it is moving from the bench to the bedside and back to the bench, I would say. Because this is confirming that what they taught us at school is not really true in terms of the Starling principle. It's not just about the oncotic pressure and the hydrostatic pressure. There is much more. There is an active filtrations in which a sieve of various porosity, like the glycocalyx, could be indeed involved in the edema formation that is, of course, of interest for both veins and arteries through the lymphatics. So we are talking about the lymphedema at the end, that is the hidden epidemic according to the WHO, a major clinical issue, as it is a major clinical issue, the one of the venous lymphatic edema that is basically affecting 1 patient out of 2, whatever kind of patients we are looking at, from whatever kind of specialty angle we want to look at. Also in terms of costs for the healthcare system that we know is associated with more than 2% of the health budget. And we have experience in this with the Ministry of Health in Italy, where we did an investigation indeed in terms of cost effectiveness of compression for even healthy subjects. So I think it will be very interesting to look forward for these kind of investigations, also for the management of edema for cost effectiveness, because indeed managing the edema, as we demonstrated by the previous publication regarding stockings, can lead to a significant benefit, not just for patients, but also for health subjects exposed to prolonged standing. In conclusion, to remain in the oceans, the turtle is reminding us that we are all aging, we are all becoming more obese, we are all becoming more sedentary, and indeed the venous procedures are constantly increasing in our national system, for which it is very important we touch these topics, particularly going out from a COVID time that likely enough is finishing, but is reminding us that the majority of the population will remain in a sort of semi-lockdown, because the majority of the population, according to the literature, lives in rurality, away from the health center. So it's very important we manage the disease before it gets to the severe stages. With this, I'd like to invite you to have a look at the dedicated project on rurality and COVID and management of venous disease that we developed with the Vivian Foundation together with colleagues from all around the world for free. It is available in different languages. It is available in different language. The last project we did with the Vivian Foundation together with the Universal Expo, presenting evidence-based data in a document against fake news in venous and lymphatic medicine. 40% of medical websites are including fake news shared 450,000 of times. So I'm really happy to present to you the document that is now available online and that will be soon published in International Angiology Journal, available for everyone in different languages and for free. Looking forward for being together in Italy, in the Italy event in northeast of Italy near Venice. I remain at your full disposal and look forward for the discussion. Deeply thank you once again the organizer for the invitation. Thank you.